So I just want to pick up, haven't seen you guys in a couple of weeks, unless you're at the town hall. I've taken a couple of weeks off of the this weekly webinar. So the COVID update is, it's masks and vaccines, right? So you guys have heard me talk a lot about whether or not employers should be mandating vaccines. And one of my messages to you as a small to mid-range employers has always been, I don't know if you want to fight that fight, right? Do you want to mandate vaccines and potentially get sued? Leave it to the big boys, is what I've said. Well, we did. We had a hospital system in Houston recently mandated vaccines. They gave a deadline of June 7th for all of their employees to get vaccinated. And they have about 25,000 employees. This is Houston Methodist Hospital System in the Houston area. They had about 25,000 employees, 178 workers did not get vaccinated by the June 7th deadline. 117 workers sued, and this Saturday, federal judge, district judge in Texas, handed down the decision that says they dismissed the lawsuit. It said basically the employer has the right to mandate vaccines or terminate. So stay tuned. I'll be surprised if this doesn't get appealed. And I think it is such an interesting sort of dichotomy between, we've got vaccine, Texas as a state, the legislature and the governor have said they don't want to mandate vaccines for individuals, but it is such a pro-employer state that they want employers to be able to do what they want with their workforces. So it's a little bit of a tension there, but stay tuned. So I think that this is an important first step. Now, this is healthcare, of course. I've said all along, I think that healthcare employers have a much better shot at mandating vaccines than maybe some other types of employers. So we saw on May 13th, this idea that the CDC has said no masks anymore for fully vaccinated individuals. So I want to just expand on that, kind of where are we in the last month over what's been going on with that. See, obviously, you have to look at your state and your local laws and see whether or not that's permitted where you are. And you also have to remember that OSHA has said that you have an obligation to provide a safe workplace, and more on OSHA in a second. And you also have to remember that as an employer, you can do more than the law requires to keep your workforce safe. There's a lot of reasons why we want to keep we might want to keep masks going in the workplace. One of them is that obviously we want to protect our employees. From just a pure moral point of view, right? But there's a business point of view too. And what we, a year ago, we saw lots of employers having to shut businesses down or parts of their businesses down because of COVID outbreaks. And so especially if you have a location that is where some of these variants are, or if you have a location where maybe the vaccine rate is not high, you may want to think about keeping the mask mandate in place even after it's no longer required by the state. And we continue to get questions. What about Pennsylvania? What about New Jersey? So this is what I'll say. Pennsylvania and New Jersey have not withdrawn their executive orders that required masking, that required screenings, that required temperature checks in the workplace. Technically, those are still in place. As a lawyer, I like to believe that someone is paying attention and that's an intentional decision that they have not withdrawn the executive orders. Of course, Pennsylvania is lifting their mask mandate for everybody on June 28th. So it would seem to be reasonable, or it seemed to be legal for employers to stop masking in the workplace if they so choose as of June 28th. But of course, stay tuned. So we were kind of waiting to see what OSHA would say on this. And OSHA kind of punted. OSHA has done a guidance for healthcare employers, but really what they're saying is go along with the CDC for everybody else. That was the excitement. We waited weeks, weeks and weeks and weeks to see what OSHA was going to do, and that's pretty much all they said. And of course, remember, fully vaccinated means 2 weeks post the last shot. So 2 weeks after the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, or the second shot of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, or 2 weeks after the single J&J vaccine. I want to talk about how do you police this if you are going to differentiate in your workplace between vaccinated and unvaccinated. The EEOC has said, yep, you can collect cards. Send out an email, get the copies of the cards. You just want to make sure you're not eliciting any kind of medical information. So you can tell people, If you've been vaccinated, I'd like a copy of your card. If you have not been vaccinated, I don't need to know why not. In fact, you don't even have to respond to this email. And I'm specifically not asking any medical questions. But to me, if you're going to make a distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated, you may as well get copies of the cards. It also is helpful to get copies of the cards just to have a sense as to where your employee population is. Do you have 40% vaccinated or do you have 80% vaccinated? I think it can make a difference as an employer as to how you make decisions in the workplace. And of course, check your state law requirements. Up here in the Northeast, there are no laws that prohibit employers from asking for the information. Of course, maintain your vaccine records as you would any other healthcare information. So, you keep your workers' comp, your FMLA, all that stuff in a separate employee medical file. You're going to do that with the vaccination information as well. And then a lot of times employers will get pushbacks from employees. Employees will say, you're violating my HIPAA rights by asking for my card. Nope, we're not. HIPAA actually does not apply for most employers are not covered by HIPAA at all. Certainly not in your capacity as an employer. If you administer your own health insurance, perhaps you have some obligations under HIPAA, but generally speaking, the confidentiality obligations from an employer come from the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So keep that in mind as well. And it does not violate ADA to ask for a copy of a vaccine card. And then, what about unvaccinated employees? Generally speaking, right now, the guidance is your vaccinated employees can go without masks. Your unvaccinated employees can still have to wear masks. Keep in mind that some vaccinated employees are still going to want to keep wearing masks. You should let them do that. Think about your personal or your family reasons. People have small kids at home who can't get vaccinated yet, and they're saying, I'm going to keep wearing a mask until my kid can get vaccinated. So you have to respect that as an employer, unless you have some legitimate business reason, probably a good safety reason for doing something otherwise. And then, of course, this sort of other considerations. This has been a very tough, strange 12 to 16 months that we've been through. And I think a lot of employers are seeing tensions in their workplaces over a variety of issues. Kevin mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about sort of how do you deal with social issues in the workplace. So we've had everything from the social justice issues, Black Lives Matters movement, to this whole issue around masking and around vaccines. And if you make a clear distinction in your workplace that the vaccinated individuals can ditch their masks, and the unvaccinated people still need to wear them, you potentially create another topic of tension in your workplace. Now, how do you avoid sort of branding the vaccinated versus unvaccinated? It's that you make a statement that the people who are still wearing masks are people who have not given me evidence of having been vaccinated, or have otherwise chosen to continue to wear their masks. So you're not explicitly saying those who still are wearing masks or those who've chosen not to get vaccinated, but it could absolutely start a conversation in your workplace, could start more than a conversation in some workplaces, depending on the tension that lies there around the vaccine issue and the masking issue. So just something to think about. I think something to be prepared for if you are going to start dropping masks in the workplace, at least for some of your employees. All right, I saw a couple of questions come up. So yeah, we've got a question that I've been discouraging you from giving a sticker or some sort of identifier that people have been fully vaccinated, and I absolutely have. I've had members ask me, can I give people the vaccinated button to wear around? But again, yes, and I understand you're going to have that distinction when you do masked versus unmasked. And again, I think it's important to say that the people who continue to wear masks are people who have not given evidence of having been vaccinated, or people who have chosen to continue to wear masks. You're not making that absolute distinction. And someone has asked, does June 28th apply to vaccinated and unvaccinated employees? It's not 100% clear. Like I said, those executive orders are still in place, that private workforces are supposed to still be wearing masks, are still supposed to be taking temperatures, are still supposed to be screening. But for the first time yesterday, I walked into a Wawa and the employees were not wearing masks, or most of the employees were not wearing masks. So that's the first time I've seen that. Generally speaking, over the last few weeks in Pennsylvania, when I've walked into retail, you see customers doing different things, but for the most part, the workers were masked. So I think that's interesting. So again, that's a stay tuned, unfortunately, question. So someone has asked for a copy of my email that I've sent to employees. Yes, I can share that as a template. We can share that in the email that goes after. Someone's asked, we no longer are required to take temperatures daily. Well, technically you are. Again, that executive order is still in place. And I still don't think it's a bad idea, even if or when it gets dropped, because, sort of hear me out on this one. I think one of the positive, you probably have heard me say this before, I think one of the positive things to come out of the pandemic is that we will no longer champion people coming to work sick. You no longer look like the warrior, instead you're going to get side eye for people who are coughing and sneezing in the workplace. So I think that the morning screening and the temperature screening is a good reminder to people that we don't want you here if you're sick. So it is something to think about even when it's officially dropped.